The black belt asked a black janitor to spar with her for fun. What happened next? Silenced the entire martial arts gym. Hey, you there! Cleaning! Cassandra Hayes' voice cut sharply across the dojo, echoing off the polished hardwood floors and mirrored walls. How about a little demonstration for my students? Her black belt glinted under the fluorescent lights, catching the attention of everyone present. She gestured dramatically to Aaliyah Monroe, who was kneeling on the far side of the gym, scrubbing a stubborn stain near the edge of the mat. I bet you've never stepped onto a real fighting mat in your life, right? Aaliyah paused, her hand gripping the mop handle a little tighter. At 40, she had been working at the Chicago dojo for only 3 weeks, usually arriving late after the evening classes had ended. The students had long left, leaving the gym silent and orderly, except for Cassandra, whose ego filled the space. Tonight, however, the advanced training had overrun its usual time, and now the dojo was crowded with 6 of Cassandra's students, watching expectantly. I don't want to disturb you, Sensei? Aaliyah said softly, almost apologetically, her voice carrying an unexpected calm. I'm just finishing up here so you can get back to it. Cassandra's laughter echoed through the room, sharp and theatrical. Everyone, look at this, she exclaimed, turning to the students. Someone afraid to step on the mat. How quaint. The students exchanged nervous glances. Some forced a laugh, others visibly uncomfortable. A few shifted their weight uneasily, aware of the growing tension in the room. Cassandra had a reputation for humiliation disguised as instruction, and tonight, she had found her target. What they didn't know was that Aaliyah Monroe had spent the last 18 years trying to forget who she really was. 18 years since leaving the professional fighting world after an accident that had claimed her closest friend, Keira Langley, in a sparring session gone wrong. Aaliyah had retreated into anonymity, taking odd jobs to survive, never speaking of her past, and always careful to stay under the radar. Not even her teenage niece knew the truth about her life before the mop and bucket. Cassandra stepped closer, her arrogant smile widening. Just a little demonstration. I want my students to see the difference between someone who trains and someone who just cleans. She laughed again, clearly savoring the moment, as if the students' attention were fuel for her ego. Aaliyah felt that familiar pull in her chest, the dormant fire that had once propelled her through 22 years of professional fighting. It was subtle at first, a twitch in her muscles, a sharpening of awareness, a memory buried deep under years of quiet living. Her eyes met Cassandra's for a fleeting second, and in that instant, Cassandra stepped back, unknowing but instinctively, as if she had sensed something beyond her understanding. Nothing serious, Cassandra added quickly, trying to mask her sudden uncertainty. Just a little educational demonstration. You won't get hurt. Aaliyah set down the mop bucket slowly, deliberately, as if every motion was a conscious declaration of her presence. She stood, her body moving with fluidity and precision that was impossible to fake. Her balance was perfect, her stance unshakable. The students instinctively froze, realizing that this was not going to be a simple demonstration. All right, Aaliyah said finally, her voice low, even calm, like the surface of a lake just before a storm. But when we're done, I want you to explain to your students why you turned the mat into a circus. Cassandra laughed, but this time it sounded forced. You're going to be the one apologizing. When you hit the floor. What the students could not possibly know was that Aaliyah Monroe had once been Aaliyah Silent Storm Monroe, a 5-time world mixed martial arts champion. She had retired at the height of her career after the death of Keira Langley, her closest friend and sparring partner. Since then, she had sworn never to fight again. But some promises, when confronted with arrogance and injustice, are meant to be broken. Cassandra adjusted her black belt with a theatrical flourish, signaling the students to gather around. Everyone, you're about to witness a lesson in hierarchy. Watch closely. The 6 students formed a semicircle around the mat. Some were eager, some visibly uncomfortable, sensing that the energy in the room had changed. Cassandra continued, her voice dripping condescension. Here we have a perfect example of someone who never understood her place. Elite gyms aren't for, well, you know. Aaliyah felt that old twinge, the same one she had felt 22 years ago, when her opponents and audiences dismissed her because of the color of her skin and her stature. But the difference now was that she had learned to convert that anger into controlled, devastating power. One of the students, a young white woman named Harper, muttered nervously, "Sensei, maybe we should continue normal training? It's late." Cassandra snapped at her, using her favorite tactic of intimidation. "Are you questioning my teaching methodology? Sit down. You'll learn more in the next 5 minutes than a month of ordinary training." Aaliyah noticed the fear in Harper's eyes, the same fear she had once seen in herself, back when she had been forced to fight through prejudice and loss. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Kira, the friend she had failed to protect, and to the accident that had ended her career. She had carried that guilt every day for nearly 2 decades. Cassandra sneered again, taking a step closer. "Show my students a basic guard. Or is that too complicated for someone who only pushes a mop all day?" Aaliyah closed her eyes briefly. Muscle memory surged back. The reflexes, the timing, the awareness of a fighter who had faced thousands of opponents across the world. Her body remembered what her mind had long tried to forget. Every technique she had mastered rose instinctively, flowing through her like water over stone. Cassandra, unaware of the storm she had just awakened, lightly pushed Aaliyah on the shoulder. A seemingly harmless gesture, intended to provoke. Aaliyah absorbed the push without moving an inch. Cassandra's confident smile faltered for the first time. "Interesting," Aaliyah muttered quietly, barely audible. "It's been a long time since anyone tried to provoke me." The tension in the room became palpable. Aaliyah's calm radiated authority and power, unsettling everyone present, even Cassandra. Cassandra, misunderstanding the subtlety, doubled down. "Did you hear that, everyone? She thinks it's interesting. Let's show her the difference between thinking and knowing." With each insult and taunt, Aaliyah's control tightened. It wasn't anger driving her, it was focus. It was every fight she had ever won, every lesson she had learned, every ounce of discipline she had honed over decades. "Last chance," Cassandra barked, irritation creeping into her voice. "Step up or I call security. You'll lose your job too." Aaliyah opened her eyes, locking onto Cassandra's. "All right," she said, calm but firm. "But when we're done, I want you to explain to your students why you humiliated someone who had done nothing wrong." Cassandra laughed nervously. "You'll be begging for forgiveness when you're on the floor." Aaliyah shifted imperceptibly, shoulders squared, weight balanced, center of gravity lowered. Any experienced fighter would have immediately recognized her stance. A perfect equilibrium, calm but dangerous. "Actually," Aaliyah said softly, "I know exactly what a dojo is, and I know this place stopped being one a long time ago." Cassandra felt a shiver down her spine. Something in the way Aaliyah occupied the space, the quiet control in her presence, was more frightening than any visible threat. Cassandra refused to back down, assuming her aggressive fighting stance. "I'll teach you respect, the hard way," she growled. The dojo's fluorescent lights flickered slightly overhead, casting sharp reflections on the polished floor. Aaliyah stood in the center of the mat, her posture calm, her breathing steady, each motion deliberate. Cassandra Hayes continued circling, fists clenched, black belt gleaming, her movements theatrical but uneven under pressure. The students, who had been hovering along the edges of the mat, suddenly realized the gravity of the situation. Something was shifting in the air, though none of them could articulate it. The energy around Aaliyah was quiet yet palpable, a contained storm waiting to erupt. Harper and two other students instinctively stepped back, forming an informal buffer around the center, while the remaining three froze, uncertainty etched on their faces. Cassandra, oblivious to the subtle shift, spoke again, her voice dripping with disdain. "Show us a guard, janitor. Or are you too afraid to step up?" Aaliyah's eyes, dark and steady, met Cassandra's. "Afraid? No. But I won't stoop to your level," she said softly. There was no tremor in her voice, no hint of fear, only calm authority. The words were a spark that ignited tension in the room, like a sudden gust of wind before a lightning strike. Cassandra sneered, misreading the calm for hesitation. "Step up, then, and prove yourself. Or maybe you're just all talk." Aaliyah shifted her weight subtly, the muscles in her legs responding like springs. The stance wasn't aggressive, but every part of her body was ready. Her movements were minimal, almost meditative, but the precision and alignment screamed of someone who had spent decades mastering balance, leverage, and timing. "Everyone," Cassandra barked, "you're about to see the difference between someone who trains and someone who cleans the floors for a living." She gestured broadly to the semicircle of students, her ego feeding off their attention. The first physical contact came not from Aaliyah but from Cassandra. A quick jab aimed at Aaliyah's shoulder, a seemingly light, almost playful touch meant to provoke. Aaliyah absorbed it without moving an inch. Cassandra expected resistance, hesitation, perhaps even flinching. Instead, Aaliyah remained immovable, her feet planted as if rooted in the floor. "Interesting," Aaliyah muttered quietly, just above a whisper. "It's been a long time since someone tried to provoke me." The students gasped slightly, the subtle calm in Aaliyah's tone carrying more authority than Cassandra's loud theatrics. Cassandra, frustrated at the lack of reaction, intensified her aggression. She launched a series of jabs and hooks, quick, clean, textbook strikes she had perfected over years of teaching. Each move had been honed to impress and intimidate beginners, and yet, each one failed to connect. Aaliyah didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. She merely shifted her weight fractionally, letting Cassandra's strikes pass harmlessly, each movement precise, deliberate, and calculated. The students' eyes widened as they witnessed what they could not immediately comprehend. "Stop dancing," Cassandra barked. "Fight!" But there was no fighting in Aaliyah's immediate response. Instead, she analyzed every stance, every micro-movement. Every tell that Cassandra had unconsciously revealed was catalogued in her mind. She noted the slight forward lean, the high guard that left the ribs exposed, the tendency to retreat with the right leg first. Her experience in hundreds of professional fights allowed her to read Cassandra's body language before the instructor even realized it. It wasn't just a physical confrontation. This was a test of perception, patience, and understanding. Every muscle in Aaliyah's body was aware, every sense heightened. She was no longer the janitor the students had assumed. She was something far more dangerous, far more precise. The semicircle of students had grown tense. Harper, standing closest to Cassandra, whispered to her neighbor, "I don't know. Something feels off." Her voice trembled, betraying both fear and awe. Across the mat, the other students mirrored her concern. Some instinctively shifted backward, creating more distance. No one had ever seen their instructor, a 5-year black belt with a reputation for dominance, so completely unable to land a strike. The dojo, usually a controlled space of discipline and hierarchy, felt unpredictable. Focus, students, Cassandra barked, trying to regain composure. But even her voice now carried a hint of uncertainty. She was used to authority and compliance, yet the quiet power emanating from Aaliyah undermined everything she had relied on to command attention. Aaliyah's thoughts drifted briefly to her past. She remembered the Las Vegas National Gym, the roar of the crowd, the countless fights she had won, and the one she had lost in her soul. Kira's accident had shattered her career and forced her into obscurity. Every decision since then had been shaped by guilt, by a desire to avoid conflict, and by the need to hide her strength. And yet, here was someone abusing her authority, attempting to humiliate others, acting arrogantly in front of impressionable students. Aaliyah realized that the lessons she had learned over decades had a purpose: to correct injustices when necessary. Tonight, this was that moment. Cassandra threw a straight punch, a textbook jab aimed at Aaliyah's centerline. Aaliyah didn't move her arms. She didn't duck. Instead, she shifted her weight slightly, and the punch passed harmlessly an inch above her chest. The movement was imperceptible to anyone untrained, but those familiar with combat mechanics could see the mastery at work. "Nice form," Aaliyah said softly, almost conversationally, as if offering a critique rather than a counterattack. "But your telegraphing is obvious." Cassandra's face tightened. "Tell a what?" she snapped, anger replacing her earlier confidence. "Every strike you throw," Aaliyah continued calmly, "gives away your intention. You rely on volume over precision. And that makes you predictable." The students exchanged shocked glances. Aaliyah wasn't just dodging, she was teaching. She was dismantling Cassandra's form without throwing a single aggressive strike, highlighting weaknesses with the calm authority of someone who had fought at the highest level. Cassandra tried again. Jab, cross, hook, a combination designed to overwhelm. Again, Aaliyah wasn't there. Her body flowed around the attacks with fluid precision. When the hook came, Aaliyah shifted backward, letting Cassandra's fist pass millimeters from her jaw. She exhaled lightly, perfectly balanced, every muscle relaxed but ready. "Interesting combination," Aaliyah remarked. "Your speed is adequate, but your defense leaves openings on the left. Adjust your weight, or it'll be exploited." By now, Cassandra was sweating, her breath short and sharp. The students were frozen in disbelief. No one could comprehend how the janitor could outclass a black belt so effortlessly without even attempting a full strike. Cassandra, frustrated beyond reason, launched a desperate series of punches and kicks, a flurry intended to overwhelm. Aaliyah moved slightly, letting each strike pass harmlessly. When Cassandra recovered from her final missed blow, Aaliyah stepped forward, closing the distance in a way that defied Cassandra's understanding of range. "How?" Cassandra whispered under her breath, instinctively retreating. Aaliyah's voice, calm and soft, carried across the mat. "Do you want to know the difference between someone who trained in controlled environments and someone who trained in professional rings?" Before Cassandra could respond, Aaliyah touched her chest lightly with the palm of her right hand. Cassandra flew backward, propelled nearly 2 meters through the air, landing on her back with an audible thud that left everyone in the room gasping. Silence fell. Cassandra tried to rise, shock and disbelief on her face. "Impossible," she muttered. Aaliyah extended her hand to help her up. "It's not about force," she said softly. "It's about leverage, timing, and energy transfer. Principles learned through decades of experience." One of the students, Harper, who had been frantically taking notes on her phone, whispered urgently to the others. Look her up. Las Vegas National Gym, 5-time champion. The room fell silent again as the truth sank in. Aaliyah Monroe wasn't just a janitor. She was Silent Storm Monroe, a legendary fighter who had retired undefeated, hiding her identity for nearly 2 decades. Cassandra's arrogance crumbled as the magnitude of what had happened hit her. She had challenged a living legend, underestimated her completely, and been publicly outclassed. Aaliyah's calm eyes met hers. "I retired years ago," she said softly. "Not because I couldn't fight, but because I chose to live differently. But disrespect others, humiliate them, that I will not tolerate." The students exchanged looks of awe and disbelief. This was more than a fight. This was a lesson in humility, respect, and the hidden stories every person carries. Cassandra, still on the mat, swallowed hard, realizing her arrogance had blinded her. For the first time, she saw the true cost of underestimating someone, and the quiet power of a person who had lived, trained, and suffered in silence. The dojo was suffused with tension so thick it seemed to cling to the walls. Every movement, every breath carried weight. The students were no longer just observers. They were witnesses to something extraordinary. Aaliyah Monroe, the seemingly unremarkable janitor, now revealed herself in all the terrifying precision and calm of a seasoned fighter. Cassandra Hayes, once brimming with arrogance and control, was now teetering on the edge of disbelief. Cassandra's first instinct was to attack, to regain dominance. She assumed the aggressive stance she had perfected over years of teaching, feet shoulder-width apart, fists at chest level, weight slightly forward. It was textbook, and it had served her well against anyone who wasn't prepared. But against Aaliyah it was inadequate. Aaliyah's stance was subtle, almost meditative, yet every muscle was poised for immediate response. She did not lunge. She did not swing. She simply existed in the space with a presence that radiated lethal efficiency. To anyone who understood combat, this was not just skill. It was mastery forged over countless fights, countless victories, and painful lessons learned at the highest level. Cassandra lunged, jab cross hook, a familiar combination designed to overwhelm beginners. But Aaliyah's eyes tracked every micro-movement, the slight tilt of the shoulder, the telegraphed hip rotation, the subtle angle of the foot. She shifted almost imperceptibly, and each strike sailed past empty space. Her breathing remained calm, measured, controlled, a stark contrast to Cassandra's rapid, frustrated gasps. "Interesting," Aaliyah said softly, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Your technique is clean, but predictable. Volume over precision, speed over timing." The students gasped. It was one thing to dodge attacks, but to critique them mid-combat with such authority was beyond comprehension. Harper, still standing at the edge of the mat, whispered to her neighbor, She's analyzing every move." In real time, Cassandra's eyes narrowed. She had been a master of intimidation, a teacher who commanded respect, but never before had anyone exposed her flaws so effortlessly. Every strike she threw revealed more of her vulnerabilities, and the realization was sinking in. She was facing someone far beyond her level. Aaliyah did not attack recklessly. Instead, she subtly shifted her stance, using Cassandra's momentum against her. A light touch of the palm on Cassandra's extended arm redirected force, a principle learned decades ago in professional rings, honed over hundreds of fights. Cassandra staggered slightly, off balance, and instinctively tried to regain her footing. The students gasped again. No sound, no visible effort, and yet Cassandra's control had been compromised. They had never seen such precise manipulation of energy and leverage. It wasn't brute force, it was knowledge, timing, and years of refined technique. Cassandra's attacks grew desperate. She lunged with a spinning back fist, followed by a low kick. Aaliyah leaned, twisted, and moved with water-like fluidity. Every blow that had once intimidated students now failed to connect. "Control your movements," Aaliyah advised calmly, almost gently. "Your shoulder tells me when you're going to strike. Your weight distribution is uneven. Timing is off." By now, the dojo was silent, save for the sound of Cassandra's frustrated breathing and the faint scrape of shoes on the polished floor. Every student was fixated, unable to look away. The sheer precision and calm radiance of Aaliyah's movements left them awestruck. The fight was no longer just physical. It was psychological. Cassandra's confidence, built over years of being unquestioned, was crumbling. Every failed strike chipped away at her ego. Every subtle dodge or counter from Aaliyah was a reminder that dominance is not inherited with a black belt. It is earned through discipline, humility, and mastery. Aaliyah's mind drifted briefly to her past. Memories of Las Vegas National Gym, of roaring crowds, championship belts, and the accident that had ended Kira's life. She had promised herself never to fight again, but tonight was different. This wasn't about glory. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about respect, integrity, and ensuring that arrogance did not harm others. The students could sense this. Even Harper, who had been skeptical and nervous at first, realized that Aaliyah's calm presence was not mere confidence. It was authority born of experience and moral clarity. Desperate to regain control, Cassandra attacked more aggressively. Jab cross hook, high kick, low kick, spinning elbow. A flurry of textbook combinations she had used to dominate many of her students. But Aaliyah anticipated every move. She shifted, sidestepped, and leaned with perfect timing. Each attack that had once been overwhelming now missed entirely. "Your technique is sound," Aaliyah said, her voice calm and even. "But you overcommit. Your defense is reactive, not proactive. You telegraph your attacks." Cassandra's face flushed with frustration. The students could see it clearly now. The black belt was faltering. Her arrogance had been stripped away, replaced with something raw and unfamiliar: uncertainty. Aaliyah decided it was time to demonstrate the true lesson. She did not strike aggressively. She did not throw a punch. She simply closed the distance, moving with a subtle, calculated step. Her hand, flat and open, made contact with Cassandra's chest. The force was not brute strength. It was leverage, timing, and energy transfer, honed over decades of professional combat. Cassandra flew backward, landing squarely on the mat nearly 2 meters away. The impact was controlled but undeniable, a demonstration of precision that left everyone in the room gasping. For the first time, Cassandra was silent. Shock and disbelief replaced her anger. The students stared, wide-eyed, as the reality sank in. This was not brute force. This was mastery. This was Aaliyah Monroe, the janitor, revealing herself as Silent Storm Monroe, a legend in the fighting world. Harper, still holding her phone, whispered urgently, "Look, it's her. Silent Storm Monroe, 5-time world champion. Retired undefeated." The room went silent again. Every student, every observer, realized that they had witnessed not just a fight, but a revelation. Cassandra had underestimated the janitor in front of her, unaware of the decades of experience, skill, and mastery she had concealed. Aaliyah extended her hand to help Cassandra up. "It's not about power," she said softly. "It's about control, timing, and respect. You should never underestimate someone based on their appearance or occupation." Cassandra took the hand, her face pale, still struggling to comprehend what had happened. Her arrogance had been dismantled, and for the first time, she faced the consequences of her behavior. The students, previously passive observers, now understood something profound. Martial arts were not just about technique or strength. They were about humility, awareness, and the responsibility that comes with skill. Aaliyah, once hidden in plain sight, had just taught them a lesson far more important than any kata or sparring sequence. Even Harper, who had initially questioned the need to confront Cassandra, realized the depth of the lesson. "Sensei, she's incredible," Harper whispered. "And the way she controls herself, it's not just fighting, it's teaching." Aaliyah nodded, acknowledging the unspoken recognition. She had fought for justice, not for ego. She had proven a point without cruelty. She had reminded everyone present that true mastery comes not from belts or titles, but from character. Cassandra finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. I had no idea." Aaliyah looked at her calmly. "You chose to humiliate, to assert dominance over someone who did not challenge you. That was your mistake." The students murmured in agreement. The lesson was not lost on them. Respect could not be demanded through fear. Authority without integrity was meaningless. Cassandra lowered her gaze, processing the magnitude of what had occurred. The dojo, once a place of fear for the weaker students, had transformed. They had witnessed humility, mastery, and justice delivered without brutality. By the time the fight ended, the energy in the dojo had shifted completely. Aaliyah Monroe, the janitor, had reclaimed her identity not through rage or force, but through precision, patience, and moral clarity. Cassandra Hayes had learned her lesson. The arrogance that had once defined her was replaced by a deep, humbling respect. The students understood the true meaning of martial arts: control, responsibility, and character. And as Aaliyah returned to her mop and bucket, calm and composed, the dojo felt fundamentally different. Something sacred had been restored, the principle that true strength is measured not in titles or belts, but in integrity and the courage to stand for what is right. The dojo was silent, the echoes of the previous confrontation lingering in the polished wooden floors. Every student, every witness, was still processing the extraordinary events that had unfolded. Aaliyah Monroe stood in the center of the mat, her posture calm, the subtle aura of controlled power still radiating from her frame. She was no longer just a janitor. She was a living testament to the value of experience, humility, and restraint. Cassandra Hayes remained on the mat, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she tried to catch her breath. Her usual arrogance, the cornerstone of her authority, had been stripped away entirely. The realization of her failure, the humbling truth that she had underestimated someone she dismissed as insignificant, was setting in slowly but painfully. "Everyone, gather around," Aaliyah said, her voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. The students instinctively formed a semicircle, giving space yet eager to hear what their instructor, or rather, the janitor who had just revealed herself as a legend, had to say. Harper stepped forward hesitantly, still holding her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. She had discreetly recorded portions of the confrontation, knowing instinctively that what they had witnessed was extraordinary. The video alone could become a viral lesson on respect and humility in martial arts. Aaliyah looked around the room. Every student's eyes were fixed on her, some in awe, some still grappling with disbelief. "Martial arts," she began slowly, "isn't just about strikes, blocks, or combinations. It's about character, discipline, and respect. A black belt, a title, or a championship does not make someone worthy of admiration. How one carries themselves, how one treats others, and the lessons one imparts, that is what true mastery reflects." The students absorbed her words, some nodding subtly, others staring with wide eyes, as though absorbing a secret long withheld. Harper, usually timid, raised her hand. Sensei, why did you keep all this a secret? Why didn't anyone know you were Silent Storm Monroe? Aaliyah smiled faintly. Because mastery isn't about recognition. It's about responsibility. After what happened in my past, the accident, the loss, I needed to step away to find peace. The world didn't need me proving my strength. It needed me to act only when it was necessary. Cassandra finally rose from the mat, though her movements were hesitant. The students noticed the change immediately. Gone was the arrogant, theatrical instructor who had belittled Aaliyah earlier. In her place was someone smaller in presence, humbled by the force of experience she could not match. I misjudged you, Cassandra admitted, her voice low and strained. I thought I knew what authority looked like. I thought I could command respect through fear and titles. But I see now that I was wrong. Aaliyah regarded her silently, then nodded. Acknowledgement is the first step. The next is change. Respect isn't something you claim, it's something you earn. Not through fear, not through arrogance, but through integrity, humility, and the way you treat those around you. The dojo remained quiet, the students hanging on every word. The lesson was far more than martial arts technique. It was about morality, dignity, and the responsibility that comes with knowledge and power. Cassandra exhaled deeply, the tension in her shoulders slowly releasing. She looked around at the students, many of whom had started to murmur among themselves, discussing what they had witnessed. I have a lot to learn, she admitted. Not about technique, but about being a teacher, about being a person who leads without destroying others in the process. Aaliyah smiled faintly, stepping back. Then let that be your path forward. Let today be the start of your transformation. The students, who had been passive witnesses for the most part, were now active participants in the lesson. Harper, inspired by Aaliyah's calm authority and precision, spoke up. Sensei, I think we've all learned something today. It's not just about kicks, punches, or belts. It's about how we carry ourselves, how we treat others, and the respect we give to everyone, regardless of who they are. Others nodded, some still in disbelief, others visibly moved. The dojo, once a place where hierarchy and fear dictated interactions, felt transformed. The lesson had penetrated deeper than any sparring match or kata sequence ever could. Aaliyah's gaze swept across the room. Exactly. Titles don't teach humility. Victory doesn't teach integrity. Only experience, reflection, and conscious choice can teach you that. Remember this lesson, and it will serve you far more than any championship ever could. The students were now fully engaged, not just in observing technique, but in witnessing mastery in its purest form. Aaliyah began demonstrating subtle movements, not for offense, but for education. Each step, each stance, each adjustment of weight was a silent lesson in control, balance, and leverage. She moved fluidly across the mat, executing a series of defensive maneuvers, counters, and subtle redirects. Her body seemed to glide effortlessly, her eyes scanning for the slightest tell in an opponent's stance. Each demonstration was slow enough for observation but carried the invisible weight of decades of professional fighting experience. Harper and the other students tried to replicate the movements, but the difference was immediately apparent. Technique alone could not replicate presence, awareness, and timing developed over countless high-stakes fights. Aaliyah corrected minor errors with gentle authority, emphasizing the importance of observation, patience, and understanding the opponent, not just overpowering them. Cassandra, still shaken, watched Aaliyah intently. For the first time, she felt what it truly meant to face someone who had nothing to prove but everything to teach. The realization that her previous approach, intimidation, aggression, and arrogance, was both shallow and destructive settled heavily on her shoulders. "Sensei, Aaliyah," Cassandra said quietly, I understand now. I thought respect was demanded. I see that it's earned quietly through mastery and integrity. Not through fear, not through humiliation." Aaliyah nodded, her expression calm. "Exactly. Let today be a reminder of that truth. Use your skill to teach, guide, and uplift. Do not let arrogance or ego define your authority." The students absorbed this silently, the room now filled with a profound stillness that reflected the magnitude of the lesson. Over the following weeks, the dojo underwent a visible transformation. Word spread of the incident, a janitor revealing herself as a 5-time world champion, teaching a lesson in humility and respect. The video Harper had recorded circulated among martial arts communities, inspiring discussion and reflection on true mastery and character. Aaliyah Monroe, though still maintaining her role as a janitor, was now respected openly by students and staff alike. The weight of her hidden identity no longer needed concealment. Her presence alone commanded respect, not through intimidation, but through dignity and mastery. Cassandra Hayes, humbled and introspective, began to adjust her approach. She no longer relied solely on authority or fear. Instead, she started focusing on mentorship, guidance, and creating a supportive learning environment. The shift was subtle at first, but the students noticed the change immediately. Harper, along with several others, began documenting lessons in respect, control, and ethics in martial arts, inspired by what they had witnessed. The dojo evolved into a space where technique, character, and responsibility were intertwined, and every student, from beginners to advanced, carried the weight of the lesson learned that night. Aaliyah stood one evening after class, broom in hand, looking around the transformed dojo. The students were practicing with renewed focus, no longer driven by fear but by respect, for themselves, for each other, and for the art itself. She smiled faintly, knowing that her actions had created a ripple effect far beyond what anyone could measure. She had confronted arrogance, protected dignity, and reminded everyone present that true power is silent, patient, and disciplined. The lesson was clear. Mastery without character is meaningless. True strength is revealed not in the fight itself but in how one chooses to wield it. Cassandra approached her quietly. "Thank you," she said, her voice sincere, "for showing me what true respect looks like. I have a lot to learn." Aaliyah nodded, placing her hand lightly on Cassandra's shoulder. "And that's the first step. Remember, strength is nothing without humility. Your journey has just begun." The students watched this interaction, a mixture of awe, admiration, and reflection. The dojo, once a stage for arrogance and posturing, had transformed into a space of learning, growth, and genuine respect. And at the center of it all stood Aaliyah Monroe, the quiet force who had turned humiliation into triumph and had shown that true mastery is measured not by titles or belts, but by character and integrity.